I'm back. For now. Welcome to the Discussion Pastures, the Cow Gamer here. Today we're gonna talk about my personal wish list for the Hunter Call of the Wild. Now, this wish list is gonna focus on new reserves, new species, and equipment, and whatever miscellaneous items are on the list that I have in my that are just deep inside my mind. So without further ado, dragging out the video for so long, let's get right into it. First up, for our new map, we have a Texas reserve. I know, I get. Call of the Wild has too many North American maps, but the two American maps I'll discuss will have unique features that would pique any player's interest. And I don't mean the hardcore players either. So what can a Texas map be different from the rest? Well, take inspiration from Emerald Coast and Virhonga, where the Texas map would rather be private land, kind of like Emerald Coast, and Virhonga, where it would have a forested area, kind of like a small marshy wetlands area for the Texas map, and the rest would be desert, grassy plains, and open space. And taking inspiration from Cabela's Big Game Hunter 2012, because I'm thinking it will be private land. There's going to be animals that are not native or introduced, like in the state of Texas itself, because the state of Texas is huge. It's a huge state, and depending on what region it is, there's going to be a whole lot of species there. And the animal roster for the map is massive, with a lot of native animals and the non-native animals that we'll discuss about. But there is one issue. Because I discussed about Texas having different areas for different species, we have to cut back on a couple of things. So if we go for the swampy marsh wetlands, we have to eliminate a couple animals such as elk, mountain lion, and fallow deer. Yes, there's elk and fallow deer in Texas. So if we go for the western route for Texas, we have to eliminate two animals such as alligators and swamp rabbits, which I'm thinking of a more swampy marsh, somewhere around near the southeast of Texas, around close to almost around Houston. The final roster will include white-tailed deer, pronghorn antelope, bobcat, mule deer, axis deer, sika deer, bighorn sheep, alligator, feral pig, wild boar, collared peccary, coyote, gray fox, raccoon, eastern cottontail rabbit, Rio Grande turkey, pheasant, and the newcomers being Barbary sheep, swamp rabbit, black-tailed jackrabbit, black duck, wood duck. So all of the species listed would total up to a whopping 22, with just 3 more species in Revontuli Coast. Revontuli Coast, there's a reason why there's a whole lot of species there. It's more species of bird. I originally included Texas as a hog hunting experience, since Texas has a real hog problem, to the point where they actually use AR weapons and helicopters to hunt them down. And yes, I actually did consider adding warhogs, because there are warhogs in Texas, but then again, they're actually quite rare around Texas. If you do find one, then you kind of win the lottery. And there were a couple of species that I considered adding when looking at invasive species in Texas. Now, flan, the nilgai, and Thompson's gazelle, but aren't accurate to the terrain I was thinking of. Black bucks are also in Texas, but that's kind of a crazy stretch for adding a crud ton of animals. But this 22 species, as of writing, is a solid choice for the new map. It will be quite interesting to see. So next off in the list is a northern Canadian map, specifically the Nunavut province. Another North American map, but more unique compared to Texas. It's the fact that most of the roster is full of newcomers. The map will be a reserve with inspiration of the Hunter's Classic's White Rim Ridge. The scenery would be all snow with pine trees, dead trees that don't have a lot of leaves because it's centered around winter. A lot of mountains, and the map will be somewhat surrounded by deep water and ice caps. Again, something similar to White Rim Ridge. And I really wish Expansive Worlds would port the map, the classic, to Call of the Wild, or make something similar. They did it with Hirschfelden. The animal roster compared to Texas is somewhat small, but again, very unique. We have the newcomers like polar bear, muskox, Dall sheep, Arctic fox, Canadian lynx, snowshoe hare, snow geese, and the returning species like moose, grizzly bear, caribou, gray wolves, and red fox, all totaling up to 12 species, exactly half of Texas' roster as of now. The map would be a perfect choice on not only their unique species, but the variety of snowy maps, kind of a hybrid of Medved and Yukon. Again, another great choice for players, and I hope would get added in the future. On to our next map, which fortunately is not a North American map. This map being centered in India. Now this is another reserve I would love to see in the game. This time having the reserve being thick, dense jungles with giant mountains and wetlands to explore. Taking inspiration from Emerald Coast's feel from the forest, the missions from Cabela's Dangerous Hunts 2 in 2009. The India map would also have some diversity when it comes to Asian maps, with Medved currently being the only one. The roster for the reserve is also similarly structured like Nunavut. These include the Gar, Sloth Bear, Striped Hyena, Barasingha, the Mughal Crocodile, Indian Boar, Southern Red Muntjac, Indian Jackal, Common Quail, and the returning Black Buck, Water Buffalo, and Sandbar Deer. That's a total of species. Pretty solid choice. I'm not including the top choices like tigers, Indian rhinoceros, Asiatic lion, and the Indian elephant since they are prone to poaching and the developers not wanting to promote poaching. Even then, some of the choices are listed as vulnerable like the Mughal Crocodile and the Sloth Bear. Both of them are debatable to be in the game due to the status. Although it's a stretch we don't include certain animals, I still think the choices here were solid for the map. And I'll stick with my opinion. If everyone has a whole bunch of their own opinions for this whole list in general, make sure you leave a comment down below. Now the final map we'll talk about is Africa 2.0. A lot of players are still eager to have another map in Africa, and I am stoked on having a new African map as well. Well, any map would be pretty interesting. The layout will probably be the same except more grassland and lakes. I do kind of find it difficult for me to figure out if a forested area like Rahanga would be added in the map, but that's just my speculated opinion. Now the species list is also massive, with new additions being the hippopotamus, Nile crocodile, sable antelope, hartebeest, waterbuck, Thompson's gazelle, impala, common eland, spotted hyenas, bush pig, guinea fowl, African black duck, and most of the returning species from Virhanga, minus springbuck, Eurasian wingian, and lesser kudu, leading to the total of species. Just like India, I left out some noticeable species: African leopard, African wild dog, zebra, giraffe, and the ever so legend African elephant. All the species being vulnerable to endangered, but also the insensitivity of hunting certain animals. Like, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with hunting zebra and giraffe if they're in the game, and some other players see these kind of majestic creatures. I did hear that Lady Legend XO, shout out, suggested that if any reserves would have endangered species, they could bump the price up and have those funds go toward protecting endangered species. I would agree with that statement, but she also says that the game already has creatures that are either endangered or at the very least vulnerable. A caribou/reindeer are a great example. Plus, it's just a game.
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
Also like India, it's a pretty solid choice of species. Even if we remove the hippopotamus or any vulnerable species, the reason why I made choices and leaving out the big names is to please Expansive World's decision about endangered species and to please players with unique animals they probably never heard of or are probably eager to see. I think this is a pretty good direction to go on. Alright, so the next category on the list is somewhat of a continuation of the reserves and species, but here are some animals that should be backlogged into the other reserves, old and new. Similar to what they did to the Granite update. Remember what New England Mountains did? Although they added a mediocre map, the Granite update backlogged most of the species that were in other reserves and putting some of them into other reserves. Two currently in-game species that we have that I would love to see, capercaillies and Medved Revontuli being placed in Hirschfelden. Hunter Classic actually has capercaillies, or wood grouse as it's also called, and the water buffalo and Procronando also being put in Emerald Coast. I really wish we had water buffaloes in Emerald Coast since they're an actual invasive species in Australia. It would be perfect. I would also like to see some new species. Dingoes are actually a pretty good species to go off, since a lot of players wanted dingoes to be in the game, which is solid. And I did consider red kangaroos to be added in Emerald Coast, but players are totally fine with the eastern gray kangaroo we have. It would be pretty neat, but I think either one of the other kangaroo species would be fine no matter what. For the new and unique species added in current reserves, I would love to see squirrels and doves added. Specifically, I would love to see eastern gray squirrels added in Mississippi Acres, and fox squirrels added in the new Texas map, which are now up to 23 species. Oh boy. I would also love to see doves added in the game, Mourning and Eurasian collared doves. Those two might be added in Silver Ridge Peaks, Rancho del Arroyo, Mississippi Acres, and the new Texas map, which now has 24 species. What a number. I specifically chose those two animals to be added because one, squirrels were actually in the game labeled as critters but removed later on. Second, the models and animations were there, and it probably wouldn't be as difficult to bring them back. I'm not a game developer, but it does seem pretty simple. Third, doves are another bird to add in the game since they're actually a popular choice to hunt. Mourning doves in particular are popular to hunt all around the US, minus the northeastern side. And Eurasian collared doves are an actual invasive species all around America. It would be a blast to see all of those species in the game, as well as the aforementioned water buffalo, capercaillie, and dingoes. But I do see squirrels, dingoes, and doves put in separate DLC packs like they did with the waterfowl, rabbits, and lion. And that is it for reserves and species. Let's move on to the next part of the list. Now next on our list is the new equipment. So first off, some new collars. Really though, there are only two species I would love to have collars for, those being pheasant and capercaillie. Both need a collar designated to them, especially the pheasant, which are extremely annoying to hunt because, I'm decent at Call of the Wild, although I'm not a big bird hunter. Hunted pheasant in the game, the only way to find them is to run and whistle, and it's pretty difficult. I also did consider the electronic collar shockwave from the Hunter Classic to be in Call of the Wild, but I couldn't figure out how it would be implemented with the other collars, and couldn't figure out how it worked. It would probably get too grating really quickly and constantly. Besides, the current calls for the Predators work fine as well. Hold up, this is Future Cow Gamer here, talking about some updates. Before writing the script, Expansive Worlds made this huge announcement that they're gonna add another DLC pack called the Ambusher Pack. Besides weapons, new weapons and cosmetics, one of the items is literally the electronic shockwave collar, which surprised me at best, because I never thought they would actually add the electronic shockwave collar. That is just insane. Again, this was just my opinion. Alright, back to the video. But yes, both those birds desperately need a collar. Move on to the next list is baiting. Taking direct inspiration from Hunter Classic, this might be a huge game changer for Call of the Wild. Baiting is an option I wish to be in the game for a while now. This would attract a whole lot of creatures into spots you wish to lure in, as long as the feeder could fit around the area. This could also take advantage of the need and drinking zones to attract more animals. It would be a higher ranking reward for players who grind and farm. These would attract species in all levels, with each higher levels being increasingly rare to attract. The Great One will not be attracted to the baits for balancing purposes. Animals that could be baited are all bears, except polar bears, with a bait barrel. All boars would have a hog feeder, and most of the hooved animals would have a block of salt lick. Specifically, all goats and sheep species, and all of the deer species, minus black buck, springbuck, sable antelope, hartebeest, Thompson's gazelle, impala, common eland, southern red muntjac, pronghorn antelope, roe deer, and moose. All bovine species will not be attracted to the salt lick block. I did consider the other predators to be baited by the meat found in their need zones, but that would make the baiting and need zone system way too complicated. Baits will be bought in the in-game store. However, unlike Hunter Classic, you have to manage the feeders at the exact location they're placed in. Baits will have a capacity of 50 units just like in Classic, but it won't have the 5-day real-time timer, with each day taking up 10 units. Both games you can see how much is in the feeders when viewed on the map. In Call of the Wild, however, there will be a small pie chart in the bottom right corner of the screen, just like the cover sent. It will slowly be consumed whenever you hunt on the map, but it will pause when you leave the map or quit the game. I understand this might be a very complex system explained and slightly broken if it couldn't be refined well, but this is a pretty great choice for hardcore players to achieve, and some new players if they level up enough. Next up on the list are decoys. I mostly thought of the Hunter Classics way of their decoys. Well, like the collars, only certain species would have these decoys. In fact, the only species I would see have the decoy treatment are the birds. Ducks and doves would get a wing spinning decoy, while the geese would get wing flopper decoys. This will give an advantage for more birds to be attracted. Again, like the collars, I did consider having the other species have decoys, like the deer and antelope, but again, it eases the system and makes bird hunting a little easier for some players, or to farm more from them. In thinking about it, having decoys for every single creature is quite time consuming, even for deer and antelope. if we already have baiting, I don't think having decoys for the bigger games wouldn't make any sense. I did consider the idea of the motion predator decoy being added, but again, I decided to leave them aside because I couldn't really figure out a way they would be implemented. Whew, that's a whole lot of systems to remember. Let's move on to the last bit of the wish list. Now the final part of the list is some miscellaneous stuff that I couldn't put in a group, so let's dive into it. One popular demand for Call of the Wild is another dog breed. Now the more realistic choice I'll narrow it down to is the Labrador Retriever. Quite a simple but important breed to add. This would retrieve birds and small game you shot down, making the harvesting trophies much quicker and easier. Another popular idea players want is a European style head mount. Now this style of head mounting would have the skull of the animals you've hunted. This would probably work with deer and bovine, but also would work with most of the predators as well. The small table mounts for birds and small game could be used to have the skull be placed on just like in Hunter Classic. I did hear players wanting horseback hunting to be added. While neat, it wouldn't really feel right in my own opinion. I had the idea of trail cams that would help find animals, mostly rare fur types, diamonds, and great ones. It's a fun idea, but seems pointless if we had the baiters. I also thought of more lodges to be added for variety reasons, but I don't really see one in the near future. Though I really wish they would make a lodge in Proc Fernando into something similar to Leighton Lake's lodge. And finally, my personal favorite idea I would love to see in the game are trophy shots. In Hunter Classic, you're able to move the animals in poses you would like. The same applies to the player. This cannot be done in Call of the Wild, however. The animal cannot be moved, and all the player could do is either take a picture of the kill or have their friend take a picture of themselves standing or crouching. However, looking into the game more, I realized that the only way to see those pictures are in the galleries. Now, galleries are a feature in the Hunter Classic to share with everyone on the Hunter Classic website. It also shows your profile, leaderboards, and stats. I do understand why Trophy Shot was removed, but it would be pretty neat to bring galleries back into Call of the Wild in order to have trophy shots added. Just a thought though. Well, that was a pretty lengthy list to talk about. I hope some of the items on my wish list become true in the future, even though I believe the expansive worlds are keeping Call of the Wild and Hunter Classic separate entities. But we can all hope. But anyways, that's going to be it for the video. If you really enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below. For more content like this, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification cowbell, show someone you know, and remember, I'm a cow, going now.